Hey everybody, I hope you all staying warm wherever you're at in Colorado today. Brandon, I love that background. It's great. Appreciate it. It's good to see you, man. Good to see everyone, and know that you all have been working tirelessly to build out a whole new reality for kids, students, and families in your communities. And as we get closer and closer to thinking about your implementation plan for the Homegrown Talent Initiative and for what the next stage of the work looks like, we wanted to circle back to one of the communities that we just truly admire and really have learned a lot from and inspired a lot of the Homegrown Talent Initiative, which was Cañon City. So we reached out to Bill, George, and Adam a couple weeks ago and said, hey, we'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're working on right now in the context of the COVID pandemic and how you're restructuring some of your district systems and thinking about the work you shared with us back this fall in the context of this new reality. I got a chance to be on a call with them about a different project we're working on and was really left really inspired by the level of thoughtfulness and preparation they've brought to this moment. And I've heard that from a lot of you all as well in terms of the way that you're thinking innovatively about approaching this moment through the Homegrown Talent Initiative as an opportunity to maximize. And so really want to use this as a way to hear from them, gain some wisdom from them, learn from them, and also learn from each other about how you're all taking on this challenge in this moment in time too. So thank you all for that. Thank you, Cañon City, for being here today, and I'll hand it back to Amy.
Thanks, Landon. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping for us today. I have everyone muted right now. If you have questions while George, Bill, and Adam are talking, go ahead and put those in the chat and we'll respond as we can. And then after they're done with the presentation portion, we'll open it up and people can interact and ask questions with voices. George had put some links in the chat. If you joined after he did that, then you can't see them. I am working on, with the latest Zoom update, some people can't copy paste or click on links in chat. So I am working on a solution for you. I will put in a shorter link where you can access all the links in case you need to type it in. And I think that is it. So I'm going to hand it over to Cañon City. Thanks again so much to you guys for doing this with us today.
I'll go ahead and start. George Welsh here, and I remember meeting most of you folks, gosh, was that back in November when you came to visit. What we've been asked to do is to just kind of explain how we've handled this sudden change in our world, instructional world, because of the COVID-19 crisis. And you know, I've been watching all of you guys as well, and every bit as high quality work I've seen coming out of you guys. Landon kind of wanted us to sort of share what our thinking was. And so I'm going to kick it off with this. I was so unaware of what we were headed for that I had a trip to Austin, Texas planned. I don't even remember the dates now, sometime a couple weeks before spring break, in which I was going to go to South by Southwest EDU. And I got there on a Friday afternoon. And part of the reason I went is my daughter lives there, so I got to spend the weekend with her. And as we're heading into the conference, well, heck, I got there on a Friday afternoon and they canceled it. So I'm there in Austin. And that's when Adam Hartman is starting to talk about, you know, this thing could get, you know, start to look a little bit like we've seen in other countries. And so what do you think about maybe preparing before spring break to have some things in place? And so Adam, would you mind sharing what your thought chain was there and the kind of things you got up and going for us?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Can you hear me okay? Great. Thanks. Yeah, and just so everyone knows, for the purpose of this time we have together here, George and Bill and I did meet with the CEI folks last week, and we have hashed out a bit of an agenda as far as things we think are important. But should you have questions, feel free to please interrupt. And you'll also see one of the things that we did very quickly is we determined who was going to kind of oversee which elements of our district. The K-5 work has been work that I've been chiefly supporting, and George and Bill obviously is our principal at our one high school. So he knows with great detail what 912 looks like, but George has been overseeing 612. So just a little bit of house cleaning on our end as far as who's been doing what. So please do interrupt should you need. Yeah, so and I'm not alone in this regard. I would imagine there's lots of other people on the call that had been paying attention to what was beginning to happen internationally and what some people were projecting might be happening in the U.S. So I just read the news. I find that sort of thing interesting, and started thinking about what that might look like if we got to a situation where our kids weren't able to return on the week of the 23rd. We had spring break the week prior. So we involved our Board of Education. There was some kind of news links that I was finding and sharing with the superintendent just to say, the dominoes could come pretty fast. I will say that we did not anticipate the length of closure that obviously we're experiencing now, but we were thinking about what it could look like if we weren't able to come back for that week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. At one point, I remember George saying, "Hey, Adam, if we're talking about closure, my gut tells me we're talking about not 3 days, but probably 3 weeks," and 3 was just being used as a placeholder at that point. We knew at that point that we needed to look backwards just a little bit. This will be an important theme that you guys will hear as far as us determining kind of what our philosophy of what the education could look like, and that we knew that we wouldn't be able, nor would we be attempting to provide brick and mortar going forward, at least for the near term. And now it turns out it looks like the duration of the 1920 school year. But what we did is we really said, okay, what are we inventorying right now? What tools do we already have in place that could allow for remote learning? So a lot of just kind of internal review, if you will, kind of conducting our own audit, and then really determining what our instructional backbone and priorities were, because we had to have a message that came out that said learning is going to continue, but what's the high value, kind of high priority learning, at least for that, what we thought was going to be a relatively temporary piece. At that point, we did say, hey, we really have an issue around day 5 because we did not have our academics at the and we better get teachers on this. So they were on the or we went on break to say we take by week communication out to families that says, don't even worry about this stuff. Don't worry, please try to have a spring break, normal spring break, and the information we're sitting on now. However, in the event needs to close the week of the 3rd, worked really hard. We ran a lot of photos. We made sure that all of that went home on that Thursday afternoon. That was before we realized just how big this thing was going to be.
Really quick rehash there. I know Adam was breaking up for me. I don't know if he was for you, but the two big things that did was made a commitment to make sure that every kid before they went home for spring break who has a Chromebook issued to them, that they took their Chromebook home. The second thing was elementary staff, and I was actually kind of bucking against Adam doing this, but Adam asked K-5 staff to send a week's worth of work focused on math and reading to head home for spring break, saying that should we not be able to come back, should there be some reason that school has to be closed because of the crisis, that you'd be able to work on that. Now, just like every one of you, the way the thing really sort of hit me in the face, I think it was the Thursday before our spring break, I think it was March 12th, when CHASA makes an announcement at that point that they're shutting everything down through, I don't know what the date was, April 7th, something like that. In fact, I was with Bill in an interview for assistant principal for Cañon City High School, and I'm starting to get these notices and starting to deal with that and see what other folks are doing. And I know a lot of, like Doug and Brenda, for example, are part of the Pikes Peak area superintendent's group, and they got together and made the decision that they were going to shut down for a determined length of time at that point. What we felt, though, is that we had the advantage of spring break coming up. And in fact, that Thursday, the 12th, was our last day with kids. And so on Friday, we started talking about what we might do moving forward. If you were to jump into those links I sent you, you will see one that says something like First Community Communication. And what I did is I linked you to our Facebook page with the message we put out. And what we said is we see what's going on. We're not going to make a decision yet. We've got spring break ahead of us. We're going to be real thoughtful about what we're going to do. And I think our community very much appreciated that it wasn't just a jump to close down, because we had the better part of a week to consider. We promised them that we'd make a decision by the following Wednesday. What we actually did, and if you wanted to look at that second community communication, is we made the decision by Monday, because by then there was enough information coming out. If you guys all remember it, it was like every 12 hours something new came out and we had to make a new decision. And I've asked Bill to talk a little bit about what we did on Friday the 13th, though, because we pulled a bunch of key communicators together and really made the commitment that whatever happens, we're going to move forward and we're going to do the best we can to instruct our kids, whatever the circumstances allow. So, Bill, would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, so that was a conversation in retrospect that not almost anything we talked about in that conversation came to fruition, but it was still a very valuable conversation because it started us collaborating toward what was the realm of the possible. So we got together, we were discussing at that point avenues of education that were still being allowed in the state, to include how could we do mostly online, but for those experiential learning opportunities, i.e. your shop classes, your CTE world, we could still possibly put some schedules together where students wouldn't lose out on those opportunities and experiences. We also had to think more than just our education or our school district, because we have a very strong and viable partnership with Pueblo Community College. We're one of the biggest producers of early college in the state. And of course, most of our college courses are being taught inside of our high school. So everything that we did as far as planning ahead was in lockstep with what Pueblo Community College was looking at and feeling was possible in their communities. And so we were, for example, we have 2 shop teachers that are Pueblo Community College teachers inside of our building, our auto shop and our welding instructors. We were looking to be in conjunction with their rules as well as ours as we were moving forward. And we even went down to the detail of planning out some socially distanced shops experiences for our students that were at the time in accordance with what was being put out. Of course, they never came to happen because of George's comment that we kept getting new and tighter restrictions as we went forward. But I still think it was a great experience from the perspective that we had all of the right people thinking about what can we do. We had a lot of great communication established between us and our partners, and that's what its value was.
Thanks, Bill. And part of the message I would want to share with each of the groups here is it's my attitude that mill overrides, bond elections, just general community support for a school, this became an opportunity for us to win those things. We had conversations such as, if we just shut our doors and we wait for orders from other people as to what to do, I think the appearance that puts out to our community is that we're not willing to step up and do our part. And so the attitude we set on that Friday meeting, even though, like Bill said, everything we planned was thrown away by Monday, it was still worth doing, because the focus once again was, let's focus on what we can do. Let's not focus on what we can't do. So of course, the first thing we were starting to worry about, as many school districts did all over Colorado, is the well-being of our students, including the nutrition pieces and such. And so, Adam, would you share a little bit about how we went ahead and put a plan together to meet the needs of our kids, the social emotional needs of our kids? As we say, we put Maslow before Bloom.
Yeah, absolutely. And George, if I begin to break up a lot, anyone just interrupt, because I don't want you guys to live through that. Hopefully the connectivity is okay. Yeah, we did, when we were together with all of you in November, you were able to see the work we had done around our core beliefs, and then the way that impacted our portrait of a graduate and the work we try to do in the schools. But the core beliefs have been very helpful to us, and really every step of the way since they were written, but certainly during a time of crisis. And this was an easy time for us to begin to prioritize what the nature of the school district should be. When you can't have brick and mortar, but what can you still do? In fact, I had a conversation with a group of about 100 teachers on Friday, because we're still moving forward with things like professional development, and we're still educating staff. But one of the things that came out of that conversation is really an opportunity for the community to experience the school as more than just a place of learning and more than just the academics. And one way that we have done that is thought about, okay, what is our core belief number one? And George alluded to the fact that we do put Maslow before Bloom's, and that we started to have some conversations around personnel and what that meant for essential versus non-essential. We knew in our community that there were a lot of people that depend on school for as much as learning how to read, but for how to get their food. I think that you guys are probably seeing that as well. We've seen where districts throughout the state have worked to try to hold on to nutrition services and get that food out. So we did deal with the food piece. We actually established 5 sites. The district has about 9 different locations, including the charter school, but in 5 of those that we would do 3 times weekly food distribution program, where kids could come and actually get meals, and we do 2 days at a time. So for instance, on Monday, you can come and you get a meal for your breakfast and lunch for not only the Monday, but also for the following day, the Tuesday. So there's 4 meals. And then Wednesday, the same opportunity. And then we bolster that even a little bit more on Friday. Right out of the gate, we were giving about 1,000 meals per day. We're going out the door. That has seen a little bit of uptick and then a little bit of down, but overall, we still find, I mean, even on a cold day like today, I guarantee that there are people that are coming to get their food, and we're glad to have been able to do that. Now, in order to do that, though, there were some things around supply chain, which we'll address because there's been supply chain issues with technology too, but just working with how do we get the food, and then how do we make sure that those people are available and we keep them safe during this time, because we didn't want any of the staff members to feel like, yes, you're high priority, but in saying so, your health matters less. So we had to be really smart working with safety and security, as well as our local public health, to make sure that our guidance was in place to keep all of our folks safe too. As well as food, we have a lot of students in our community that, in our school district, I should say, that do get counseling support services, both through the school district itself and our own counselors, but even more so through 2 partnerships, important partnerships that we have with Solvista, and as well as through Gateway. So we met with those guys early. I'll give them a lot of credit on this. They actually reached out to us before we even reached out to them, just to say, look, we're moving forward. We're going telehealth all the way, and we want to make sure that we can work within your system and make sure that you guys are comfortable with what this is going to look like. So we were doing that work before kids. I think the first meeting on that was before students even returned from break. So to make sure that we could continue to honor those groups and those individual sessions, and they've been wonderful. So obviously did that on the food piece. I should mention with the food piece, we actually have since become kind of a flow through for some other organizations who have wanted to volunteer to help support the community, where we, like for instance, last Friday, we received 14 pallets of food. And George, I can't remember if it was, who exactly that was that made that donation to us. So did they say Care and Share? Is that correct? At any rate, that food came to us, then we quickly get that food right back out the door. And we're doing that even through a backpack program, where that's actually just on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that increases the reach of how much food we've been able to get out to our families in need. We also did a piece just with kind of material planning, and that was a big thing during spring break, was figuring out exactly how we were going to convene people together and do it to get materials out. Because at the same time, we were doing some really unprecedented things as far as leveraging monies that were actually intended mill levy expenditures for the 2021 school year to find Chromebooks available out there to expedite the purchase of one-to-one for all of our K-5s. So we actually,
Adam,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Let's hang on to that, because that's going to be a little bit further down.
Great.
Biggest piece of that first one was making sure we were taking care of our people, our kids, our staff, our community. And the biggest focus on that was with counseling, lining up counseling services and the food. So we get to Monday, and I think it's by Monday, I don't even remember anymore, but at some point we come to the realization that we cannot open school. Maybe Governor Polis even made a call. Maybe he hadn't yet. But what we did is we for sure came to the realization that we're not going to come back to school in its traditional form in any sense after spring break. And so we started shifting the conversation to what we can do once again. And just where we were, and Bill is going to talk to this for the most part, is we already had a 6 through 12 device implementation going. And Adam had already had the foresight to remind all the kids to take those devices home over spring break, though that wasn't with 100% surety. And so Bill started taking over the lead as far as designing what the 6 to 12 plan might look like. Bill, I'll go ahead and put it up while you go ahead and talk about it. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds great. So one of the things while George is putting that up, I'd like to say is that one of our other 4 core philosophies or principles is the idea that we're future focused and that we're risk takers. And one of the things that had been done over the last 18 months in the high school that really epitomizes those 2 philosophies is the idea that we had not only gone one-to-one and blended like many schools across the state, but we'd come up with the idea that we wanted our high school to provide our students with an opportunity to also do what we called flex scheduling. Classes where our juniors and seniors in particular, and we only offered it at that level, could take a class and be live 2 days a week and online 3 days a week. So they would still have the opportunity to go in and do things like a science lab or get some live instruction or get some FaceTime with their teacher, but they would also then have the ability to continue their coursework over Schoology, which is our LMS. And that did a couple things for us. Number one, first and foremost, is it taught those juniors and seniors what it's going to be like in college, no matter where you go. You go brick and mortar, you go online in college, you will have the opportunity or you have a necessity to be able to manage your classes online. The other thing that it did is it allowed us to put some flexibility into the schedule. For example, these students who had these opportunities could take more than one course in a given block during the day if they were go-getters and wanted to do so. They could also do an internship during that time period, or they could go out to the local community college and take a college class. So we had that experience. Our juniors and seniors knew what it was like on a day-to-day basis doing a distance learning example. So the transition from where we were before spring break and where we ended up after spring break was not that great to these juniors and seniors. Still had to get there with our freshmen and sophomores, still had to get there with the other classes that did not participate in flex scheduling, everything like your shop classes, your PE, physical education. We still had a lot of work to do. In coming together, George has shared the document, which is actually pretty simple. It's not all that detailed, but it was necessary from the perspective that what we really all felt, George, Adam, the rest of the secondary principals in the district, all have this idea that it would be most eloquent in our presentation of our program if we all came at it from the same perspective. If the middle school had a different perspective from our K-8 school, for example, that may be confusing. And then add on the high school has a different approach, especially students or families with students in multiple schools. Then you would have, okay, well, I don't know what's going on because it all looks different. So we wanted one approach to secondary learning. We came up with this one-pager, if you will, that said, this is what we all subscribe to. This is how we're all going to approach the week of education week by week. And then what we did is we all added a second page that was individualized to the building based on whether we were a middle school or a high school, or maybe we were a core knowledge school. And then we would specifically individualize what that looks like at our own levels. And I think in doing so, the community appreciated the fact that it looked like we had done our work in coordination, and certainly we had. This document was shared out amongst all leaders in the district and gone over, and then it was taken down to the building level and shared out with the teachers and staff so that they could have their input as well. And so I think it was a very well coordinated document in that, from that regard.
So this all took place during spring break, in which the structures were set, and so our principals worked their tails off during spring break. And one thing that I would just highlight as well, because this was a big question, right? And I don't know if I'll be able to highlight it. Yeah, was what are we going to do about attendance? And this is talking about 6th through 12th grade level. And the discussion was, we're going to continue taking grades, we're going to continue awarding credit, and so, but we're not going to worry about the attendance. What we're going to worry about is the kids getting the work done. We're going to shift from seat time to completion of work or mastery of skills and concepts. Anything you would add about that, Bill?
No, just that like you said, was one of the primary questions on a lot of people's mind. And as that went across the entire state, and you watched all the conversations, certainly there were some people with dissenting opinions within our own district about whether we should keep it or not. In the end, of course, we had to make the decision what's most important. And we also, I would say, made that decision on behalf of our teachers, because what we did end up doing was taking that decision, that daily decision, did a kid attend my online class or not, which certainly isn't as easy as a live class to take an attendance. We took that decision off of their plate, and we took that task off of their plate, and that allowed our staff to focus more on learning opportunities than what I would call an administrative requirement.
Thanks, Bill. And so back to Adam now, where he was heading. I had the easy job. I put myself in charge of 6 through 12 instruction, and I worked with the 6 through 12 administrators, and we set up a scaffold, is the way I'd put it, by which when we came back from spring break, we would hand it over to our teachers, and the teachers would fill in the blank spaces. Now, Adam Hartman had a whole different task because he was dealing with K-5. And remember where we are at this point, all we did is we sent a packet home with every kid before spring break, and we're coming back from spring break, and we got to figure out what to do K-5. So why don't you share that a bit, Adam?
Sure, thanks. You probably all noticed at the top of George's document there, he had a date on there of 3/26. That's all pretty important, kind of looking back. Really, the high school and the middle schools just felt like, give us just a few days and to get folks back on the clock here after their break. And I think we can get this thing launched by the end of the week. And that's where that 3/26 came in. I believe that they did a soft launch on the 26th of March, which was a Thursday by my memory. K-5 was a whole different deal. That packet, and the teachers were not happy when I made that request, and even the principals were like, "Oh, I can't believe we're really doing this." I mean, we even had some conversations where folks were saying, "Come on, do you really think we're going to have to close school?" Well, in hindsight, doing that and having them do that prep bought us some time, and I don't want to say it was busy work, that it wasn't on point, because we actually pulled all of that from our regular map that was going in at the elementary level that said this does need to be a continuation of where we're leaving off here. However, we recognized that it wouldn't be much more in the way of much more than just doing the work, because teachers weren't going to be available for office hours and so on and so forth. We knew that we needed the week of the 23rd to really allow them to prep. So here's where we were not a lot of equity. So Bill mentioned a few key things earlier around the use of Schoology as our learning management system. Super, but we only use it at 612, and we've intentionally actually chosen Schoology at the K-5 and that decision over singular L.
Adam, breaking up again. Adam.
Yeah, Adam. We're losing you again. Let me pick it up here, and then I'll turn it over to you in a second, okay? Assuming maybe my internet connection's doing a little bit better.
Adam, try turning off your camera the next time you talk. It might help with your voice. But go ahead, George.
Just so you know, Adam's in a household of 4 people, 1 teaching, 2 taking classwork, both 6 through 12 students. Do you want to keep going?
Yeah, I can certainly try again.
Go ahead and pick up from where you left off.
Great, thanks. And I did turn off the camera. Hopefully that helps. And yeah, you're right, George. My wife is teaching and my kids are both schooling right now. So there's a lot of that. At any rate, we just had a lot of inequity from school to school because they didn't all have devices. We had some buildings where we were one-to-one and we had others where we weren't even close. And then we had buildings where we had a consistent device type and other buildings where it was a bit of a hodgepodge. So we had to put a rush order on actually accessing those funds and getting devices ordered. That was really intense. And one day I actually happened to be out of the office and had approval of purchasing. That particular batch was 656 Chromebooks from a vendor that we had never used before. And he wanted to be paid up front, which is not something that we typically do. And our chief financial was concerned that it might be a scam. I mean, it was just like, oh, are we really going to do this? But we did it. And I think that our core belief number 2 around risk-taking kind of played in there too, because we knew we had one small window to actually get this done. Those devices were loaded on a truck on a Monday. They were driven from California to Cañon City by the Wednesday. We turned our entire IT team onto, almost round the clock opening, provisioning, and then redistributing with Chromebooks so that we could get those computers now, along with physical materials, along also with medication, musical instruments. I mean, there were a logistical kind of things going on there to bring those into some windows where we could have families come to the schools and get all of that. So the teachers work their tails off, the building, obviously admin, custodians, and so on and so forth. But that IT piece was a big part of getting those devices for the sake of equity. Here's where we did have equity that we're very proud of. We've been training our staff for the last 3 years now on blended formats, all of which really lend itself really well to remote learning. So I think you probably heard us mention before that we have trained staff through the iLearn Collaborative. They've taken 45 hours, and those teachers had just finished up, the elementary being the last of them, right at spring break. So the timing was great. I don't think anyone anticipated they'd be using the resources like they are having to, but I think they're very pleased that they had that in their back pocket. We also reviewed all of our curriculum and created a section on our website where we were putting out digital learning resources for families as well as teachers, and really going back to that inventory that I was talking about earlier, chose the primary modalities that we wanted the teachers to work from. We established parameters for the amount of instruction per day, and we've cut that down significantly because we knew that 2 hours would probably be reasonable for families. But we leaned on ELA and mathematics, but we held on to all of our interventions. So all of our intervention groups, special education, Title I, they're still running small groupings with kids, and they're doing that every day. What is very different at the K-5 is that we knew right away, you might remember I said we had to establish our philosophy. I remember even when I was up on March 12th asking George, saying, I really need to understand philosophically, what are we trying to be? If we close school, what are we trying to be here? That was pretty important because we knew at K-5, we probably wouldn't have the same accountability measures moving forward with attendance, grades, GPA implications that we could do at 612 because we just didn't have as much consistency. So at that time, we did make some decisions around how we would start to measure participation. I worked with all of the principals to actually get that thing ready to rock so that by the 30th, that could all be record keeping, if you will, too. And we're still working actually with Infinite Campus right now for gradebook implications for our fourth quarter and our third trimester for what that's going to look like. So if anyone has questions about that, I could answer those questions later. But yeah, that one was big. Supply chain was an issue for us. The second batch of Chromebooks didn't show up until last week. They've all been provisioned and handed out, swapped out for any bad computers. So one silver lining here is that the entire community at the K-5 level got their devices almost half a year earlier than they would have received them. They wouldn't have gotten them until August.
So there was a question in the chat. George, did you see that question from Karen that she saw both pass, fail, and grades referred to in your document? And she said, what are you doing for grading for secondary? Is it kid choice or teacher choice?
I would prefer Bill to answer that. I know it depends, it's course dependent.
Yeah, so definitely a conversation that we got a lot of people involved in, had a lot of great discussion. It goes to a couple different points. First, as I've mentioned previously, we probably have about 30 to 40% of the courses in the high school that are established both as high school credits and college credits. So obviously they're earning the early college with dual credit for them. So as we reached out to Public Community College and asked them what their grading structure was going to be, it became apparent to us that they were not going to change off of traditional A through F, which helped us make a decision about where we wanted to be. We also felt strongly enough in our ability to impart education that we could continue with crediting and grades and GPAs and all the things that come along with it through our processes. That helped us also make the decision. Like I mentioned before, we have been doing this for a while. We have this flex scheduling routine. We knew our teachers could do this, so we again used that to help us decide to maintain traditional. The one thing we did include, and this is why you see both in the document, is that we understand that there will be individual circumstances for students out there where distance learning is not going to be conducive. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. It may be connectivity issues. It may be because of a 504 or an IEP and something that's going on with those students that this was something we can't overcome. And so what we did with those is we also made it clear to all teachers that if they ran across a circumstance and had a conversation, that they could push that back to the counselor, case manager, admin level at the high school, and that we could collectively make a decision about a pass-fail for any individual student in any individual circumstance. And of course, it does take the entire team to do that. And like I said, we want IEP team together if that's the case, want the 504 team together if that's the case. And of course, we want the parents' input if that's the case. And so we have already made plenty of decisions about students in individual classes that they've gone pass-fail. We've also made the decisions to just simply drop classes for students because of their circumstances not being conducive. And of course, anytime we drop a class, the first thing we ask ourselves is, will they still be able to make the graduation credits? And if not, how are we going to do that for them? And of course, we're looking at all sorts of programs over the summer, if we're allowed to go forward in that time frame. And as we come back in fall, how we're going to get them caught back up if that's the case. So all those conversations are ongoing as we move forward.
Thanks, Bill. And just to kind of keep us moving forward. So the point at which we are is we're a couple weeks into digital learning, 6 through 12. I've got a daughter downstairs taking classes. My wife keeps coming out of the bedroom where she's teaching from. She teaches 7th and 8th grade social studies and language arts at one of our schools in our district. It's starting to become pretty routine, and that's pretty cool to see. However, coming out of spring break, we really had concerns about what our families thought we might be trying to do to support this learning. And all I'm going to say is in the links that I shared with you, you can see there's an interview about e-learning, and that's Adam and I having a conversation just like we're having right now about what our expectations were for getting ready for 6 through 12 instruction and what K-5 instruction might look like. And that was, I think, done about Thursday near the end of spring break when we had an idea what it was going to look like. And then on Friday, I interviewed Bill and basically was able to put out the whole situation, what this will look like for high schoolers. And if you go to any of those links, you'll probably also see some of our links to the elementary principals who were interviewed. So we used the mode which we were going to be doing direct instruction with our students to record videos to put out on social media and through direct email to our parents so they can kind of get a better idea what to expect as far as that was going. So moving forward, Bill, one big piece of Cañon City High School that everyone learned about is our work-based learning, and that we have this intern and apprentice program that was pretty much rocking as we headed into this crisis. What does that look like right now?
Well, amazingly, it's still intact, and that's due to, again, a lot of creative people in the community as well as our coordinators here at the school. We had about 40 internships scheduled for this quarter, and we were able to salvage about half of them. 20 of them went away because the circumstances of those internships just would not be conducive. But 20 of our employees downtown and places in Cañon and Florence said, yes, I can still do something with this student in a distance or a virtual environment, and I can still count this as a viable internship. And I'll give you one example. We had a student that was working at the local history museum. And instead of that student coming in and being part of the service part of the history museum or cataloging things where they would have to work alongside others, what they did is they said, hey, what we would love you to do is I want you to sit home and write a daily blog entitled what it's like for a senior or class of 2020 member to go through COVID-19. And so the student is writing that daily blog. The History Museum is putting that blog out to the community, as well as putting it in their archives. So kind of a really cool opportunity for that student to be part of history and get their internship credit. Another great idea that came out of George, he has them every once in a while, is the idea that we knew that because we had high school students and middle school students, and especially elementary school students, all in the same family in our community, and those elementary school students probably were not going to, well, they weren't going to be as proficient as online instruction as our high school students were. That there would be a lot of tutoring, a lot of help. This is how you get online. This is how you work this particular function or problem. And because that was happening, why not take advantage of that as a workforce opportunity, that online tutoring? So we formalized a program at the high school, and we're now giving a quarter's worth of credit to any student who has signed up, and there have been 30 of them so far that have signed up, that is tutoring another student in Cañon City Schools, whether that's a little brother and sister, or in some cases, perhaps a neighbor. When they're tutoring them, they have to put forward some documentation, just like our work program requests. They have to get signed off by their parent, and once all that documentation is collected, we'll give them that credit.
Wonderful, Bill, and I would like to take credit for that idea, but I remember it came out of a board work session. One of our amazing board members said, is there any way we could do that? And what's really good about that is what I've heard is so many parents are dealing with also trying to work, whether working from home or actually being an essential employee, working somewhere else while they're trying to get their kids through this. And to incentivize a high school kid to coach their younger sibling through it is pretty fantastic. Adam, speaking of essential, there was a point at which we started coming to the conclusion that Governor Polis was probably heading toward a stay-at-home initiative. And so what is some of the work we did up front about that?
Yeah, so we were thinking in terms of what that would look like at the building level, and then what that would look like in terms of the larger district level operations. And I think this is a perfect moment for me to share one thing we did back to that kind of community connection piece. We had been approached by the Boys and Girls Club to provide essentially just a space, just to provide a host space for them to actually provide staff who could thereby do childcare for medical professionals here in the community, just planning for the idea that perhaps doctors and nurses and so on and so forth would have to work to meet that need, but then how could we support the needs of their children during the day? So got that off the ground very quickly, and it really pushed the point then around physical space and what that would look like for staff being able to be in buildings. So as uncomfortable as that was, we actually set a timeline where anyone could access the building. By the way, the principals actually work with them to make sure that the numbers were appropriate and that we didn't go past the threshold on how many staff would go into buildings, but that they could go get all the materials they thought they'd need and have them and take them for the rest of the year. And then from that, then saying, okay, who's going to be essential to this going forward? So we've made some determinations in buildings that would still be doing some hosting, such as the school I mentioned before, around their custodial crew, around principals. But then at the district level, we really had to decide, back to that roles and responsibilities, what's the backbone of the school district right now? So we did meet as a group of directors. George and I were obviously part of that term within the operations work, what work essential. We also have something interesting going on in town right now because we are building 2 new schools. So there was some coordination with our primary contractor and subcontractors about what their limits were going to be in terms of if they were essential to this and if they could continue working. By the way, they have been. So that's been a good thing that's come out of this. But then we also needed to say, look, folks are going to need to get paid. We've heard the governor say the importance of any employer to be able to continue to keep people on payroll. And we've been fortunate. We made a decision right away that we would continue to find meaningful work for all of our employees and that we would also pay them. We had already budgeted to do so, and we are doing that. Well, if we're going to pay folks, that means that our payroll folks are thereby essential. In fact, I am at my home right now, but I've been at my office all morning. This morning I went in because I had some printing needs that I couldn't deal with here. And payroll are the only folks that are there. So did some decisions around all of those pieces. Nutrition has been probably highest on that point because of the aforementioned need that we're trying to meet for the community around food. Obviously, the superintendent, myself, and so on and so forth. But almost all of that work is happening remotely at this point. Bill's actually joining this conference from his office, but even the principals, for the most part, have been working remotely and only accessing the buildings when absolutely necessary. And they've done a great job with that. And they've also actually had to oversee when we have had teachers that needed to get into the school, or if we had to have staff distribute more materials because we, like I said, we had to give out devices in 2 waves. The principals have done a great job of trying to limit that just to essential workforce and working with skeleton crew and honoring people's need to be home.
So another big task for us has been trying to support some community partners we have. And when you guys came to Cañon City, you probably did a tour through TechStart and you met some people. Luke Javernick, probably, who runs a program called River Science. And perhaps you met Gregory Carlson, who has a business called Blickle, which is an online math instruction tutorial. And both of those folks' work very much shifted because of this. And something we're seeing as part of our responsibility as well, if we can, is trying to get them over the hump. They've been great community partners for us in terms of opening their doors and allowing our kids to do internships and also opening up educational opportunities to our kids. And so we're trying to find some ways that we can invest in the work they're doing that will benefit us as a school district a little further down the road. And in the meantime, get them through this difficult time that they're having right now in which they can't do the work the way they intended to do the work. So that was pretty big. And so before going to this last topic which is what we think it might look like when we come back, is I'm going to start with it, and I would sure like Bill and Adam to chime in as well. But so one of my major work duties right now is something I call meeting surfing, and perhaps you're all going through it too. And I ask as many people as possible to invite me to their staff meetings, to hangout instruction meetings and such. And so every day I've got a menu of, something like 5 to 10 of these that I could actually attend. And here's what I got to tell you, I'm seeing and hearing with our classified staff, the non-teaching staff, the instructional paraprofessionals, the work they're doing with intervention reading groups. Sorry about that. That's really intervention reading groups, and the way their faces light up when they talk about being in a session with students is just fantastic. I was in a staff meeting this morning for Lincoln School of Science and Technology, and they did a student, but this is about a 270 student school, and they went a grade level, student by student accounting of who hasn't been actively engaged in the learning and what they're doing about it. And to me, it's like, holy cow, that you would take the time to do that and then to develop plans. It was an hour-long meeting in which they made a game plan for every kid who hasn't stayed deeply engaged in the learning to this point, they would find a way to get them to be able to do that. We have teachers doing things like delivering messages to their students on their doorsteps, creating one that I'm featuring in this week's Echoes from Cañon. She created what she calls is a virtual refrigerator door where, you know, you'd be proud of work from your kid and you'd post it on it. And so she's created basically a website in which she can do that for her students. So Bill, Adam, anything you guys might add about some of the cool things we're starting to see?
I have a couple that I'd just like to get out there. You know, like most high schools, we had daily video announcements. Today, the folks that produce those were able to get together and for the first time post our first video announcement. And they did it, of course, all virtually from all of their different homes, and it was very well done. So we're back to being normal as far as having daily video announcements from the high school level. Proud of that. We had our link crew come together and put together a fundraising opportunity. Downtown Sonic, every Wednesday night, we would always collect 10% of the gate as a standard fundraiser. Link Crew came up with the idea of, hey, what if we were to take that 10%, go out and see if we could grow it a little bit through fund matching through other businesses, take all of that money and give it to a local bakery that probably really needs it right now in this time, and then have them bake a bunch of goods that we could then get delivered to first responders all across Cañon City. And that's exactly what happened. It was a tremendous virtual effort, if you will. Raised about $900 in the community, all went to this one local business who produced all these great baked goods, and our police force, our fire department, our doctors, nurses, and healthcare staffs all received a little bit of a pick-me-up as an opportunity. One of the reasons I'm at work today is because we're gathering learning materials across the entire district from all schools. So papers, pencils, coloring books, everything you can think about that would offer a student more of a kinesthetic approach to learning or a hands-on approach to learning. And we're going to distribute those all tomorrow in conjunction with our food distribution program to any parent who wants them. The idea of hey, our kid can draw something, color something, do something that they may not have the opportunity to do because of family circumstances. That's happening tomorrow. And finally, our high school's fashion and design class is now being taught by their instructor, and materials will be handed out in mass later this week, how to make personal protection masks. And they're doing that not only for their families, but they're also then going to put them into mass production and get them out to the community. So just a couple thoughts.
Adam?
Yeah, at the K-5 level, I think that is just speaking to people who are leaders here. I think this is really important. We recognized that for a lot of our folks who might have been secretly hoping they would never have to do much with technology, or who just were, perhaps they were close to retirement and thought, oh, I don't really need to learn all of these new things. We really are seeing, I'm just blown away by how nicely the teachers have actually shifted to taking some risk and being creative about how they can do the same thing we've done in the past, but differently. And I think from that leadership perspective, right away, we extended a lot, not language around accountability for staff, but for trust about staff, to say, please take this opportunity to try some new things, and you're not going to be judged harshly for this. This is that moment. So when I look out and I drop in on whether it be instruction or whether it be the meetings that George is talking about right now, our work, what those guys are really trying to do to increase participation is to think about highly engaging ways to deliver content. Teachers that are pre-recording and providing morning story hours. We have Hangouts being used to bring even large groups of 24 little kids at once all together. Kids that are submitting work now through Google Classroom that just their teachers didn't ask them to do that before. And we're starting to hear things like, wow, I'm really blown away with what my kids can actually do here. Also, we've seen one thing that really hasn't been spoken to here at the 612, but it's really important at the K-5. We've seen more probably parent and family communication with staff than we have before, ever, because our teachers, we ask them to make those calls and create those contacts. So office hours being maintained by all the teachers. Moms and dads need the help right now. As George mentioned, a lot of them are either struggling to maintain their job, or they don't have a job and they have needs that are kind of bigger than worrying just about school. So how can we help support those guys? So some really beautiful connections that have come out on the parent communication. And I have found, I monitor the dashboards of our electronic resources we provide. We have more resource being used. I swear to you, we will come back in the fall with teachers who are better equipped to offer blended opportunities, because they've had to do some things that in the past they just had not done. So I think those are some bright spots that are coming out of K-5. I should note, I've been paying a lot of attention to national and state level concerns around participation. We are concerned, and we are already finding, George mentioned that the school's doing a student by student accounting for who that is. We are finding that there are some families who, whether it be with connectivity, lack of interest, or otherwise, their kids are vulnerable, even more vulnerable now than they were before. So we have a lot of planning to do, and George is going to talk about next steps, but how we can actually assume for kind of assessing readiness for matriculation and those things. And I'm proud of our schools that they're already holding on to as much dipstick progress monitoring as they can to help us really understand our kids, not to administer those grades, but to understand how the kids are progressing during this weird time.
Frank, I saw a question from you there, and I'm going to have Bill answer it in a second. Take a look at it, Bill, if you haven't. But before going to that, is as weird as this has been, we've been trying to do everything as normal anyway. You know, we have this weird school schedule in which every other Friday is a professional development Friday. We cut our staff slack the first week back where we didn't make them do that, because it was kind of professional development enough for them to have to take everything they do in person and convert it to a digital delivery format. So what the heck, we let them drop that one. But the first official one we had since spring break, we actually held last Friday, and oh my goodness, the discussions that you're seeing is what I've said, and Adam has kindly shared with a lot of people, is this has been education's Sputnik moment. You know, this is, I mean, the tools we're using have in some ways been here for the last 10 years, and we've all been trying to push forward with them as educational institutions. And for the first time, we've actually been forced to use them. And so sometimes necessity can be the mother of invention. And in terms of starting to think about that conversation of what it's going to look like when we come back, we're going to consider a lot of things. But one of the things I think we got to consider is we can't let everyone slide all the way back to their comfort zone, what it was like before this crisis. So, Bill, your answer about community service?
Yeah. What we do have as a graduation requirement is a community internship. So a little bit different than perhaps community service, although it could be the exact same thing depending on how it's implemented in an individual circumstance. So every one of our graduates, starting with the class of 2022, will have to go through an internship, a quarter-long internship, about 40 hours of work in a downtown place of business, governmental organization, or of their choosing, by the way, that lines up with their career pathway curriculum. And that experience, I think if you came here to Cañon and got to hear our students talk, has been monumental for those students that have gone through it. And so that's our graduation requirement as far as getting our students into the environment to work with community members.
And of course, what Frank is asking is other creative ideas, and one for sure, Frank, is we're giving credit to the kids who are helping younger siblings for sure, but in a documented way. And I have no doubt that Bill would be happy to share what those documents look like in case you wanted to kick off something like that in your community. And by the way, there are lots of other community service opportunities. Go mow a neighbor's lawn, you know, I mean, all the things that there's people who are trapped around who can't do things right now, supporting them in various ways would be wonderful. I'm a fan of Cotopaxi's social media, and Danielle Van Esselstein in Cotopaxi, they're posting pictures all the time of their high school seniors out doing community service, and it's sort of that person-to-person community service, chopping wood, fixing fences. You know, they're a very rural community, and so they're out doing it. And I got to tell you what, their community's got to be very proud of what that school district's doing because of the work they're sharing there. So talking about starting when we start to come back, and especially focusing on K through 5th. Here are some anecdotes I'm hearing. And it's sort of natural. All the kids who are go-getters and have been excelling, they're even excelling more right now. But why is that? Because they're home for long stretches of time with very involved parents who are very educated, who are very good at getting them to enrich their learning, are very good at keeping them responsible about what they should be doing. And so, you know, you got that chunk of kids right there who we're not going to be worried about when it's time to come back. I also hear anecdotes, and one of them I hear from my wife is, you know, I've had kids who struggled all year in various ways with traditional face-to-face instruction, and holy crap, they're doing well. This whole opportunity for them to use their time wisely, to get short bits of direct instruction and then to do project work has been wonderful for them. And so she, in essence, feels like she's found a way. And I've heard this time and time again from our staff that some of the kids are finding that this digital environment is a very successful one for them to be learning in. And then, of course, we've got some kids that Adam indicated that we're really concerned about. There's so many issues going on in the home and such that we've just got concerns. And so the advice we've given our staff moving forward is, if you were already on track to possibly retain a kid before this crisis hit, there's no reason why you can't continue down that road, and we can make that decision if what's best for a kid to repeat a grade, despite whatever happens this fourth quarter, that we might do that. But also we're starting to think about when we do come back, and I don't know where we're going to get the resources. I hope there's enough in federal stimulus that will allow us to extend the school year, we're thinking about a jumpstart school the first 3 weeks or month before school starts, where certain kids will be invited, required to come back into school and show a bit of progress before we let them then start the regular school year at the grade level they were shooting to get into for the coming year. And then we're also talking about there just might be a large group of students who just need some extended learning throughout the school year in forms of maybe some specific interventions in math or reading after school. And if we can get some dollars freed up to offer some of those things. So I think I'd be happy to turn it back to Amy Landon if you wanted to ask any questions or open. Oh, Bill has something to say.
I just wanted to put one thing out there specific to the class of 2021, who, of course, both Adam and George have students in that class. Of course, they had the privilege of being the first class in the state to have graduation requirements levied upon them. In our district, that translated into a capstone for all process and program. And of course, going into the most important semester of their life with graduation requirements, the accomplishment of the capstone next fall, which was our plan, they're now being, if you will, shortchanged the opportunity of having live instruction going into that opportunity. So that's also been a challenge. And what I will tell you is that it's one that we're meeting head on. Last Friday in our first PD session at the high school, we had a group of advanced teachers. And when I say that, I mean the ones that have been working with me on capstone since its inception. We actually went through and graded 5 live capstone presentations by our first 5 class members of 2021 who were ready to go. And for the purposes of how are we going to normalize the evaluation across our staff, how are we going to grade these next fall and make sure that our teachers know what an evaluation looks and feels like. And of course, that would have been a much easier thing to do had we been live with these students. But we weren't. We didn't have that opportunity, so we did it over virtual. Took us about 2.5 hours to get through the process, and we did. And the outcome was very, to be honest, very rewarding. First of all, the students did a great job. Second of all, the teachers learned what the look and feel of a capstone is supposed to be like, and we're able to have some pretty in-depth conversations about how are we going to move forward with its evaluation. We are not 100% settled on how we're going to move forward with capstone, but what I am optimistic about is the idea that as of right now, we're still on for capstone presentations in the fall for these students. And until something changes that knocks that off, as something that we'll move forward virtually with.
So we'll open it up for questions now. You can type questions in the chat. You can unmute yourself and ask a question. I know a lot of the work-based learning stuff and grad guidelines came up at the very end. So if there's follow-up questions you have, please do so.
I'll speak to the one about surveys. Here's what we actually did. Those 2 surveys that I shared links to, there's one's a parent survey aimed at 6 through 12 parents, and one's a student survey aimed at 6 through 12 students. We actually plan on releasing them to be done this Thursday, completed by next Monday. It's about making some midstream adjustments to our digital learning. We actually, Adam conducted a K-5 parent survey prior to kicking off K-5 instruction. The key to that was understanding who had internet access and access to devices. And it was that survey that really guided our decision to go ahead and pull the trigger and purchase all those extra Chromebooks. We realized we were going to have to level the playing field because some families with 3 kids might be trying to get all 3 kids to learn using one questionable device within the household. Adam's got a K-5 parent survey that's going to go out at the same time. It'll be this Thursday. And so we'd be happy to share what results look like back from you. But what that is it's our chance to monitor and adjust the instruction we're doing. I've heard anecdotes from teachers saying, boy, I thought I was being reasonable, but I determined I was really piling it on too much to my kids during that first week. And so they've adjusted already. But I've also heard some parents saying, I feel like my kid doesn't have anything to do. You know, and so we want to hear from parents if that's the feeling.
George and Bill, this question, I know this will resonate with a lot of our homegrown talent communities. A lot of folks were about to dig into some real partnerships with businesses in their communities, and businesses are reeling right now. What advice would you give to them to kind of re-inspire businesses to stay connected to the initiative and to really think about it as a part of the long-term effort in their communities?
I'll offer one simple one, and that is encourage the folks in your district to patronize those businesses. At every chance we get in Cañon City, we talk about those small local businesses that have been a big help to us. If it's takeout food or if they're starting to sell some things online. There's a wonderful website that's sprung up in Cañon City where you can actually purchase some of the products online, even bid on them, a la eBay, or purchase gift cards. Teacher appreciation is coming up here in May. That's one of the topics of our board work session today. And one of the things I'm going to encourage is that we go to as many of our local businesses as possible during this chunk of time, and we purchase gift cards to go out to our teachers. Our teachers for sure deserve something nice, and then why not do something nice for them by purchasing something that might give a little fuel to one of our local businesses while we're getting over the hump here.
One other opportunity that I saw, of course, we all know about the Career Development Incentive Program and the funding stream that can come from that. Pretty new to our state. It's pretty lucrative and it's payoff. And so we've been working with a lot of our community partners who've been working with us to help them develop certifications to move forward to the state and be added to the list. this may not be an immediate relief, but what it does give and provide is a long-term hope that if I can get a CDIP certificate and work with my school district on that, that those funds can perhaps also fund our future in our education partnership. And I think that's something we've been working on with a couple of different organizations, and it's going to give them some long-term prosperity.
Just a comment to Matt. He asked if we had done a survey with teachers. And so, Matt, I'm going to share a link up here. I didn't do that. It was after our work on Friday the 13th, in which we thought we were going to actually still bringing kids in, but in small chunks. And we had a wonderful plan. I then sent a video to staff explaining what the plan was. I then sent the survey to staff, and then circumstances changed pretty quick, but I think the survey is still worth taking a look at. It actually guided our decision to make the decision to close school down for the couple weeks after spring break before we really even were directed to. And so I'll share a link to that survey for you to show what we asked our staff at that time.
I saw the question about sharing our tutoring documents. I will have Lisa Tedesco send those over to Amy later on today, if that works, to get those out to the group.
And there's a really good question there from John about scenarios planning for the 2021 academic school year in our schools. Well, my answer is I can't say that we've thought that far ahead. We're trying to get through to the end of the year, and we're certainly looking, as I said, trying to offer some kind of extra support for students who need it to level the playing field a little bit before we go into the next school year. I haven't heard out of the governor's lips a concern that we wouldn't come back to school somewhat as normal in the fall. However, I do recognize that is a possibility, especially if there's sort of a resurgence of the virus and there's no way to combat it going forward. So I would sure be interested in anyone else's thoughts as far as to what plans we might make going forward along those lines.
George, we did have a little bit of communication this morning, you'll see, with our district nurse too, around the potential planning for if we were to have to bring kids back in small groupings too. So our district at the elementary level has used staggered roll-ins at the beginning of the year for the sake of transitioning kids back into school. We're going to work with public health because evidently they will be the point person on this, giving us the guidance. You're right, George. Governor Polis hasn't really given us any reason to believe that we aren't set, that we wouldn't be able for a fall return. But it may very well be that we need to be really sensitive to numbers. So I think scenarios, John, is a perfect term that you've used there. I think we'll probably need to build up a handful of different ones, but will involve public health, whom we have a good relationship with, as well as district nurse, for what that could look like, both in terms of time of day, calendar, and group size. So, but until we know more in terms of guidance, we're guessing.
Any other questions?
I just put that link to that staff survey in the comments as well, if anyone wanted to see that. Could even show you the results. There was a lot of, hey, just tell me what you need me to do, and a lot of fear. It was worth doing because it sure expressed a lot of fear from staff. And this was, once again, kind of early, right after the CHASA shut down.
All right, I'm adding that to the links page that I posted earlier. All right, I think that is it for our questions. Want to thank George, Bill, and Adam so much for sharing with us how you have handled this situation and how you are thinking about work-based learning. Landon, Alex, anything else to say?
No, just thank you all for your work, and I hope that all of our districts found this helpful and with tons of ideas. So thanks, guys.
Thanks so much to Cañon City, and I hope all the HTI and some of the innovative learning opportunities, pilots, programs also got something out of this. Have a great work week.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.